Welcome and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Rausch. I'm your own personal sales maven here to offer you tips and strategies and techniques to master your sales conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about how to stand out in a crowded market, strategies to really differentiate yourself, your business, your expertise. This is so important because depending on what industry you're in, you might agree you've got some competition and you might feel like it is overly crowded. I will say that most of us feel that way, whether you're in coaching, whether you are a designer, whether you are in leadership trainings, health, the health industry, like whatever industry you're in, chances are you feel like, oh, it's so crowded. How can I possibly stand out? Especially when it feels like there are people that are so far ahead in their businesses than I am, or that there are people that are, kind of are always where, everybody talks about, like whatever that is. So it is crucial that you're able to differentiate yourself and really showcase the things that make you unique, your expertise, your story, your background, and your approach. All of these things are crucial in the success of sales. Now, you could say this is branding, and it certainly is, but it also comes up in your sales conversations as well. So whether you're writing, email promotional campaigns, whether you're putting together sales pages, your website, things that you're posting on social media about your offers, and whether you're just out in the community networking and whatever community that is, whether it's online or whether it is in person, all of these things matter. So let's talk about a few things. Some of these might seem like, yeah, Nikki, I've heard this before, but I'm hoping by hearing it again, it might resonate at a deeper level and or spur an idea for you. That's always the intent behind these episodes, is for you to glean either something that you can immediately use or for it to spur an idea where you're like, okay, because I heard Nikki talk about this, here's my better idea. I want you to always have a better idea than what I give, right? That's awesome. Okay, first and foremost, I find that a lot of times when people are feeling like they're in a really crowded marketplace, one of the things they're often not paying attention to and not doing is leveraging their expertise and their credentials. It's one of those things like it's kind of, I know there's a behavioral economics term for this, but it's like once we do something and it's done, it seems to like diminish in importance, and we don't really hold it at the high value that it would be to a potential customer. So we get our credentials, maybe we talk about them for a little while, but then we feel like, oh, I've talked about them so much, I don't need to talk about them anymore. But that's actually not true. Or your years of experience. I know when I'm working with clients one on one, a lot of times when I'm looking at their bios, I'll say, like, we need to zhuzh this up a little bit. Like, I feel like you're really underselling yourself because to you, it's like, well, I don't want to toot my own horn, but it's not about you and it's not for you. It's for your prospects. It's for that potential buyer who wants to know they're buying from an expert. So, in your sales conversations, you really want to own your qualifications. You want to show off your credentials, right? And whether it's that you've got some kind of board certification, you've got a doctorate degree, or you have an X number of years of experience, you want to bring that into the conversation because a lot of times you might be competing with somebody, whereas you might have 5, 10, 25 years of experience versus somebody who just started 3 months ago. You want to really showcase and differentiate yourself here. So don't sell yourself short. And you don't always just have to list your credentials in a sales conversation. Weaving them in to a story or into a statement that you're making is a really easy way to bring them into the conversation without feeling like, here's the feeds and speeds of my credentials, which, they're not looking at your resume. That's where that goes. But here's an example. So here's one that I might use is I might say, when I was going through my master certification for neurolinguistic programming, I learned X, which now allows for me to show my clients Y, right? So I can bring in like the X and the Y here, but I relate it back to my master certification. So that's one way that you can do this. Or you could say, this one is mine, so you're going to come up with one of your own. But when NASA was purchasing the product that I was selling, or when I was selling to NASA, here is something that was important to them, and this is something that I bring into my current work today, right? Like you name dropping a little bit here, name dropping around your credentials, name dropping up around if you've got some high profile clients that make sense to bring into the conversation. Don't be afraid to do that. I find that again, when I start working and digging in with a client, and whether we're working through like a proposal, I know I just had this happen recently where a client hired me to review a proposal that she was sending for a pretty high profile project to a very high profile company. One of the things that I mentioned right off the bat is that we needed to really lean in to her expertise in her bio. She was really selling herself short. So no reason not to like oomph that up a little bit. And then be specific about your years of experience. I find oftentimes people are afraid to work that into the conversation, but you don't have to give the exact number. As a matter of fact, I like to give a number because I've been doing this for a really long time. So sometimes I think, is this going to make me sound old if I actually say that I have 30 years of experience in sales? So I say 25 plus because I feel like I don't know that it makes that big of a difference once you reach that 25-year mark. But you can say 7+ years or 3+ years or whatever your years of experience are. You can work that into the conversation. So here's an example. If I was speaking to a prospect, I could work into the conversation, over my 25+ years of experience in this field of sales, I've been able to show thousands of clients, or I could make this specific to my business. I could say, over the last 11 years that I've owned and operated Sales Maven, I've been able to show thousands of clients how to achieve a 75% close rate or more on their consultation calls, or like, again, whatever put in there. So speak from a place of integrity. Don't make up something, but say something that you know is true, and don't be afraid to lean into it of like, oh, I don't want to toot my own horn. It's okay. You're not tooting it for yourself. You're tooting it for the prospect so that they can reaffirm that they're making a really smart decision in working with you, hiring your company, choosing you as the provider for whatever it is that they need. And then here's a second way to really stand out. And this is another one of those ones I feel like sometimes people are almost timid to do. And I want to say, lean in and lean in hard to this one. And that is to take a stand against common advice in your field when you have a difference of opinions, or when you have a different perspective to share. You want to really lean into that hard. So I know, one of the ones that I lean into in my business, and I hope this spurs you thinking about what are yours. And as a matter of fact, I would challenge you to come up with a list. Try to come up with 3. And if you can really push it to come up with 5, this gives you 5 things that you can be talking about on a regular basis. And if you can only come up with 1, that's okay. Like, start there. You'll start to find as you work with more and more clients, they'll start to say, you have a very different approach when it comes to X. And then you can like pay attention to that, and then you can lean into this. One example of my differentiator, a piece of advice that I really think sets me apart from other sales coaches, and definitely from business coaches, is this idea of why it's so important to put pricing on your website. And I know that most business coaches and most sales coaches advise, especially people in the coaching realm, to not put pricing on their website, because they say to the person, oh, don't put pricing on your website because you want them to get on a consult call so that you can build up your value. And I totally understand why those business coaches and sales coaches are saying that. They're saying it because it's super empowering to the person that just paid them money. The reason I feel differently, and the reason I will like shout this from the rooftops, and this is like a soapbox thing for me, is because I don't give advice to my clients that make them feel good. I give advice that is meant for how their clients or their prospects are going to perceive them and what they need to do to earn that person's know, like, and trust in business. I've already got their know, like, and trust. They've already hired me. I'm not here to placate. I'm not here to like make them feel good about not having to list their pricing. I will say till my last breath why it's so important to have pricing on your website. And I can make a case for 95% of the time why this is so crucial. And I will keep speaking about it. So, what are your things? What's that piece that feels a little bit controversial to you or is different from what your typical competitors are saying or doing? And lean in. And I mean this when I say like lean in hard. Don't be afraid to talk about it constantly. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think like, oh, everybody already knows that I feel strongly about this. And then we'll have somebody join the Sales Maven Society and they'll come to a coaching call and they'll ask a question about, Nikki, do you think I should put pricing on my website? And I feel like the other society members that are on the call are like, oh boy, here she comes. She's on her soapbox because I am so passionate about this. And it's that different advice. It sets me apart in a certain way. So what are yours? And then kind of the second piece that I would say that still goes into like take a stand against the common advice is really lean into the things that you're passionate about. Don't be afraid to speak from a place that might alienate people. I know I've been doing some podcasts about this of like, it's okay to repel the people who aren't a good fit. And sometimes you'll repel them just by really speaking about the things that you're passionate about, the things that you believe in your heart to be true, the things that you know based on your experience to be true, and just your integrity. Like, I have real integrity when it comes to X or Y, or I am so passionate about, A, B, and C. It's okay to lean into those things, even knowing that it might alienate some people. Now, I want to put a disclaimer here and say I would still avoid certain topics about the passionate. Like it should be work related, like somehow tied back in to the work that you do. Just speaking about, like, for instance, I wouldn't talk about my stance on gun control in my sales coaching business because to me, it's not relevant. I do have a stance about it. I do have an opinion, but I'm probably not going to bring it into this kind of a forum because it just doesn't really seem like my opinion here is going to move the needle for any of my prospects and or clients. So what are those things that you're passionate about in your business that make sense for you to talk about? So I know I said this to a client recently, like not everybody has to agree with your stance. What matters is your ideal client is going to resonate with what that stance is. So as much as it's easy sometimes to listen to the non, the non-client, the person who's not an ideal client for you when they've got criticism or they think that you should have a different kind of stance to something, I don't ever want you to make changes to your business or to how you show up in a conversation based on the people who aren't your ideal client. This is also why I say be careful about asking people who would never pay you money. Oftentimes, those are your friends and family on their opinion about your take on something, your marketing, your offers, your pricing. They would never pay you money. They don't get a vote, in my opinion. So you can decide how you how you want to take that. The third thing is making sure that you're always speaking directly to your ideal client. I feel like I kind of have hit this a little bit, but you want to be thinking about what are the unique needs? What are the unique struggles to your ideal clients? And then can you tailor your message to really emphasize how your approach, your framework, whatever it is that you offer, how it directly benefits them and touches on and solves the struggle and or meets the need. Like, what are the benefits? And I know that I recently did an episode, it's probably been a few months now, depending on when this episode comes out, where I talked about features, advantages, benefits. Um, that was another, like, actually, that kind of speaks to some of the stuff that I was talking about here. Like, I talk about features, advantage, benefits a lot in private coaching sessions. I really push my clients to really lean into benefits a lot. Um, and it wasn't until I re-listened to a group coaching session and heard myself talk about it that I realized I don't think I've ever even written an article about this. I'm not sure. I don't think I've done a podcast episode about this. And so I chose to do that podcast episode, and I never know how these are going to go. Like, I really can't predict whether or not you're going to like this episode or not. I want it to resonate. I hope that it does, and I do everything I can to ensure that it will. But realistically, sometimes the ones that are big hits, I couldn't have predicted. That one I got so much positive feedback from that episode, from people saying like, "Oh, I really need to think about this more." And as a matter of fact, I had a couple clients hire me to just work with them on helping them move from features and even advantages, and really digging out like what was the benefit, because sometimes we can't do this for ourselves. It can be hard to do it for ourselves. Um, but that is a message that really resonates with my ideal clients. So my guess is you're going to hear me talk about it more, because I will lean in hard to the things that resonate with my ideal clients. So it's important to be listening. What are the things? What kind of feedback are you getting from people? And if it's something where you think like, oh, that was just a throwaway line, I just said that off the cuff, I can tell you a lot of my things that I still lean into now were things that I said off the cuff. Um, One example is, if you've ever heard me talk about creating curiosity and how important it is to create the here kitty kitty statements, this idea of dog calling versus cat calling. If you've never heard me talk about this, I apologize that I'm not going to go into it. But that was something I just said off the cuff one time that somebody, like, it was like the lights came on. And now I probably talk about that when I guest on podcasts more than anything else. I would suspect if you go and look at the 350 some podcasts that I've been on, that probably gets mentioned the most. Lean in hard to those things that people go like, "What? Oh my gosh, that's so interesting," or, "Oh wow, I had never thought about it that way," or, "Oh, that gives me something to do with it." Like, what kind of feedback are you getting from your ideal clients? And then again, like attracts like. So we want to lean into these things and bring them more into our sales conversations. And you can always test the waters, right? Like, sometimes I'll say the here kitty kitty thing, and I get somebody that gives me like a blank look, like, what is this chick talking about? That's okay. I can just move on with the conversation. I can like abort talking about it and give them a different analogy or a different example. So look for those things. And then, of course, remember that your authentic message, the thing that make you you, that is going to resonate with your ideal clients, right? Like, not everybody's a client. That's okay. Some people can't stand lots of things about me, frankly, and that's okay. They're not my ideal clients. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with one this morning. I recognized, based on the way she described her experience with me, of like, oh, she simplified it to the most basic thing. Frankly, it was a little offensive. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up when she commented about it, and I was like, "Oh, here's a good indicator of why you're not an ideal client, because you didn't even recognize or pay attention to what we did for your business. So therefore, you're not an ideal client. I'm not here to try to convince you how great I am as a coach. That's not what I do. I deliver, and then you have to implement. And if you don't implement, you don't get results. I don't consider that on me. So, you know, like, not everybody's a client. That's okay. So look for those things that connect with you and connect with your audience, and lean into them. And then here's another thing that this is the last one, and then we're going to wrap this episode up. But as the expert, as somebody with your X number of years experience, or as somebody who has worked with this company or that company, or helped hundreds or thousands of people achieve X, Y, and Z, right? All those things that make you you. Also remember that in the sales conversation, it is absolutely appropriate 100% for you to say, my recommendation for you is, or I recommend this solution to you. Now, again, when you're selling, I shouldn't say again, I'm always referring back to the 8 million times I've said this in the last week, but it wasn't part of today's conversation. So I want to like pull that one back. But it is when you're selling, I always say you need to identify the person you're talking with or the person that you're communicating with in whatever form, that they have a need. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you have a solution. And the third thing is that you have their permission to put the solution in front of them. And when you know those three things exist, you are absolutely well within your realm, your permission, your expertise to say, I recommend. My recommendation for you would be XYZ program. Not like, I think you would get a lot out of blah, blah, blah. I think is so wishy-washy. It's so soft. No, I recommend. My recommendation for you is stand in that place of credibility. This will be another way that will differentiate you from your crowded marketplace where people are like, oh, you can just choose any of these options. It's like, no, we want to work with an expert. We want to work with somebody who's willing to stand in their place of authority and expertise and make a recommendation. I will say 9 out of 10 times when somebody recommends something to me, I take their recommendation because I only want to work with experts. I do this at restaurants. It doesn't always work out for me at restaurants, but I will ask the server, like, what's the best thing on the menu? Or what would you recommend between this choice and that choice? Like, I love to hear a recommendation. And I've just hired recently quite a few different people to do some things for us in my personal life. And they have all come from recommendations. I want to work with people. Like, I love when somebody will recommend somebody. I'm so much more likely to hire them when it comes from a recommendation. So when an expert that I'm talking to says to me, my recommendation for you is this, I still am going to gut check. I'm still going to make sure that that's the right decision for me. But more than likely, I'm going to go with their recommendation, and your prospects will go with you too when you're willing to stand in that place of credibility and authority and make a recommendation. Don't be afraid to do it. All right. So we talked about a lot here. We talked about making sure you're highlighting your credentials and your expertise. We talked about, take a stand on the things that differentiate you, the things that you disagree with amongst your competitors, and really lean in hard to those things. Making sure that you're speaking to your direct ideal client and being okay that sometimes the message will cause other people to go away. That's okay. Not everybody's a client. And then look for that authentic messaging that really connects to your voice. And that part there is this, like, my recommendation is this, or I recommend XYZ for you. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. I hope this particular episode was helpful for you. Would you let me know? Was it helpful? What did you get out of it? What was your takeaway? And of course, if you like this episode and you found it beneficial, please share it. Share it with somebody who you think would benefit from listening to it. I just got a message this morning from one of my favorite, I'm gonna actually say she's probably one of my biz besties. I adore her. I love talking business with her. And she sent me a podcast episode this morning. It was like, Nikki, check out this podcast episode. I love that. Right. So if you like this episode and you want to recommend it to somebody, please share it and or leave a review. All of those things matter and they count. Thank you for listening. I'm wishing you continued success in all you're doing. Have a great rest of your day.